Yo, Bachi 2007 back at you again with men's mind state and cultural reviews. Here on the channel, we have been looking at a number of articles from the New York Times with these rabid headlines on modern dating. Here's the first one that we looked at, and we did a couple of pieces around it, but the main one being this one called Men Have Checked Out of Modern. Well, that's my subtitle there. It's called Men, Where Have You Gone? Please Come Back. And I actually added on to there, they're begging now, which is what this article was doing, talking with this woman who's in her, I believe, 50s, divorced, and was talking about men not being out in public spaces where women are looking to find men and where they are showing up and they're tending and the men aren't here and we've noticed that they've just disappeared and we want you to come back. And so, because the women are here and they're tending, of course, so the women are all right, and of course, the men are all in the wrong. And then we've had this one, Why Men Should Stay Gone from Dating. That's my title. But the name of the New York Times piece was Why Women Are Weary of the Emotional Labor of Man Keeping. This condescending, self congratulatory piece where women pretend as if they do all of the emotional work in a relationship and complain about the fact that they make the social calendars because they're the ones who are in the social calendars and men are not, and other various nonsense such as whining about supporting your partner in a relationship, which is what a relationship is, emotional support. So basically women are saying they don't want to have to do anything in a relationship. They just want to be there, and men should show up and not only pay all the bills and provide all the material wealth, but they should do all of the housework now, or at least equal housework along with paying all the bills, and they should carry all of the emotional weight in the relationship. This is the kind of nonsense that is coming out of the gender studies, far leftist, kind of man hating, women superiority mind state. Hit the like button, subscribe, and notification coming through the door, and then we're going to get right back to the program. And so we've also got a new set of items, or another um, set of articles that we want to look at here real quickly. So another one that they've recently come out with is under this term heteropessimism. And there was an article done called The Problem with Wanting Men. And that's part of, I think, what's under this article here. But you can see that the New York Times has a paywall. So you try to get on their site and you can't because this paywall pops up. But what we can do is go down here to this New York Post article about the New York Times article and look at that one. So that's what we're going to do here. And typically when I do these kind of article reads, I typically have read the article before I do the video on it. Today, I just kind of skimmed over the first few sentences of a couple of these articles that we're going to look at. And but we'll kind of be reading them together for the most part. New York Times, ridiculous heterofatalism. Heteropessimism and heterofatalism are synonyms. I think one was the first name given to it, and then I think it was changed from heteropessimism to heterofatalism. All right. New York Times, ridiculous heterofatalism embrace is further evidence of sad, sickly post millennial outlook. That's a good way to put it. Sad and sickly. Dating is hard. They have this going. Let's see if we can get steady. Okay. Dating is hard, but blaming all men for your horrible choices is easy. And of course, this is what the feminists do. This is what the gender studies ideologues bring to the table. It's absolute nonsense. This is written by a lady, it looks like Ricky Shalot. She goes by Ricky Rikki. Last name spelled Schlott. If you can't see that, you wanted to look her up or something. So even she's saying blaming all men is ridiculous. And of course it is by definition. The total blaming of a demographic group based on immutable facts about themselves is fascist ideology. So we talk about the right wing fascists we have in this country, which we do, but we also have a left wing fascism. Any ideology that posits a a staple about a whole group of people based on just their existence as that group, and their immutable characteristics, them being male, them being this race, things that are not choices like a philosophy, but a philosophical group that you belong to. That's something to attack people on, right? But when you make up a negative disposition about a whole group based on just their physical existence, being a particular race, being a particular nationality, being a particular gender, being a gender race combination, then you are without question a fascist. Just as we can understand and see that it's fascism when right wingers say all people from a particular country are criminals. We should also be able to also see when leftists say all men are evil just for being men, right? So this goes on to read a New York Times piece, The Trouble with Wanting Men by Jean Garnett, posits that the trouble with wanting men is men. They paint themselves into their own paradoxical box. This is how ludicrous and nonsensical their whole paradigm framework is that they draw from. The whole gender studies paradigm is absolute nonsensical garbage. And these people are really just vile people who want to be victims, and these women have to find some kind of way to always be the victim, but they are in fact the perpetrator. They are the fascists. They are the despicable, disgusting misandrists. And while they claim to hate men so much and don't need men, they everything about them and all of their natural desires, uh, to their chagrin, are for men because they in fact do need men, and this is what they just can't escape, and it just eats them, and it's too bad, but it's funny for us to sit here and laugh at them twist and contort themselves. And it says, okay, the trouble with wanting men is men, like all of them. It's part of a genre of man-hating thought pieces that turn hetero love and dating into an all-out gender war and totally absolve women of any agency or responsibility in their relationships. And this is the other funny thing about it. The same women who claim that there's this patriarchy that tries to take away women's agency always pathological pathologically diminishes women into these infantile beings and absolves them of any responsibility or accountability, which in effect takes away all of their agency. So while they claim it's the patriarchy taking away their agency, it's in fact the matriarchy and this matriarchal gender studies ideologies that actually do what they're again projecting on men. An article in the New York Times titled "The Trouble with Man Hating," the trouble with wanting men has gone viral. All right. There's no accountability or introspection, just the big diagnosis that men are the problem from a woman who has decided to pursue open relationships, casual sex, and situationships into middle age. So basically, this woman is failed at relationships. She's basically failed at being a woman. And because she has failed, she must find somewhere to lay the blame because, as we know, accountability is kryptonite to most women. Women want as the saying goes, they want all of the privileges of men. Um, they want the responsibilities of being women and the accountability of children. And so they would take no accountability for their lies. Instead, her failure as a woman, her failure to acquire and attain and keep a man is the fault of men, not something with her. She doesn't need to look inwardly at herself and have some introspection. It's all men's fault, of course. It's a sad, sickly post millennial take on Sex in the City that's further evidence of just how bleak the modern romantic outlook really is. So we're going to skip through some of this. It's a word. So it's talking about how heterofatalism came up with by some academic, Asa, whoever this person. Now I'm gonna try to pronounce their name. Who cares? They're not even important enough to be bothered with giving them that recognition. But what it goes to show, the state of uh, gender studies and psychology, academia, and its far leftist, um, far leftist fascist disposition is just rancid within that group. When people try to say that feminism has gone awry, and feminism hasn't gone awry, feminism is awry. Feminism is the problem. And its roots and its core is just rotted by this type of disposition. So it's saying heterofatalism is a word that reeks of misandry. Absolutely. Garnet's own heterofatalism manifests in lamenting with a female friend that they can't just be gay with one another and declaring that men are what is rotten in the state of straightness. So heterofatalism basically posits that being with men is terrible because men are all terrible, but because they're heterosexual and they want men, their lives are doomed, and it's men's fault because they're so terrible. If men were just better, they'd have a better life. Again, these women are failures at being women, and because they completely and totally failed, they need someone to blame. And of course, who else are women going to blame for everything in this modern age, especially Nazi, fascistic leftist women? They're going to blame men. And a lot of right wing women who are politically right are just as feministic and left wing in their thinking, or kind of this fascist thinking about men, and have this misandrous standpoint. Look at Tommy Lauren. She's as right wing, conservative, not a fascistic as she can be, but she's just as much as a gender study, man hating feminist as they come on the left. So it's really not about political left right. It's more about the disposition vis-a-vis their mentality and their mind state in regards to gender, and having this kind of fascist disposition, and this disposition. It just goes to show that women's disposition inures towards being unaccountable. And we just see it in every aspect of life in dealing with them, right? Garnett reveals that her open marriage fell apart because her an open marriage is no marriage. Her open marriage fell apart because she fell in love with another man. In fact, toppled the whole structure of her life for a man who told her from the outset that he did not know how to do relationships. Ah, yes, the classic. So she's mad because she's stepping out of her marriage, not actually having a real marriage, but wanting to kind of redesign societal norms and societal structures and God-given structures to try to do her own thing. It didn't work. Of course, this notion of open marriage doesn't work. And when it didn't work, it's somebody else's fault instead of her own fault for engaging in this foolishness in the first place. Unbelievable. All right, let's check out something else here. Take a quicker look at a few other opinions on the matter. What is heteropessimism? This is from the conversation, I guess, conversation.com. What is heteropessimism, and why do men and women suffer from it? So at least this piece says it's men and women are suffering from it. A friend introduces their partner as my current husband. Another jokes about marriage as a life sentence. Everyone laughs. No one is surprised. The sentiment at the heart of these asides are pervasive and familiar to many people, and many people in or who have had heterosexual relationships. There is now a term for this negativity: heteropessimism. Heteropessimism is a new word for an intuitive, possibly very old concept in white Western culture, coined in 2019 by a writer. There goes that person, Asa, whoever again, Saracen. Heteropessimism is an attitude of disappointment, embarrassment, or despair at the state of heterosexual relationships, specifically about being in one. Now, a lot of this has to do with people's, again, disposition about marriage. If you don't know what marriage is for and you don't get married for the right reasons, and which you shouldn't be getting married if that's the case, then you box yourself into this position where marriage is this doldrum, and it's this punishment, and you're chained to a situation you don't want to be in. But then again, this goes back to people's personal decision making and their own outlook on an institution that they shouldn't engage in if they don't believe in the institution and what it's about, and they don't believe in doing what is the institution requires, which is uh, building towards life goals together based on having shared values, and those shared values should surround um, the male and feminine give and take of building a family, and the fact that men and women, male and female, masculinity and femininity complement one another, and those should be understood to work in their proper complements, not to be working against each other, not to be this competition, not to push things to be the way you want them to be, and nor should it even be simply based on love, when you're defining love as simply a feeling, which is a transitory feeling that exists right now that may not exist tomorrow. And as circumstances changes, if your love is circumstantial, then obviously the love won't be there when the circumstances change. Therefore, then the relationship becomes a jail sentence, because you're in it for the wrong reason in the first place. You're basing it on the wrong thing. So, yes, this kind of thing has existed already in kind of Western culture, but there's a very good reason for that. It's because of the way in which people engage in an institution incorrectly that they shouldn't otherwise engage in if they're not going to do it for the right reasons. Now, also, if you look at this term, heteropessimism, they don't call it relationship pessimism. Again, this all comes out of gender studies ideology. It comes out of the same ideology that not only produced it started with feminism, then became gender studies, which produced the LGBT agenda and all of these kind of LGBTQ anti uh, heterosexual ideologies, where they posit that it's everything heterosexual is kind of a social construct, and gender is a social construct, and it's a whole desire of upheaval against social norms of reality even. And so now, um, the problem in relationships is specific to heterosexualism, which is funny because you know what who the number one group is to get divorced or to have relationship breakups? Yeah, uh, that would be lesbian relationships. You know who has the most domestic violence, when we've been told all this time that the problem with society is men, and if women just ran society, it would be great. And men are the problem with relationships, and all relationships break up, and because men are trying to dominate women, and men are so awful and evil, and all the violence in the world would just be eradicated if women were in charge, and we didn't need men, and you weren't tied down to this ball and chain of this hetero fatalism, and you didn't have to want men, you wouldn't have to worry about men brutalizing you. The number one group who commits domestic violence are lesbians. They beat on each other like there's no tomorrow. As soon as women get some power, they're just as violent, and in fact, this demonstrates more violent than men. When they're in a position to be violent, when they are not against the biological imperative of men's physical dominance, and they have the power to be violent to someone, they're just as violent. They're more violent than men. There you go. So Saracen's definition is useful because this pessimism is accompanied by paradoxical practice of sticking with heterosexuality in its current forms, even if it's judged to be irredeemable. But it's only people with this twisted mind frame who judge it irredeemable. If men and women would fall into their places of masculinity and femininity, and would stop trying to upset the apple cart of what's worked for humanity forever and what's the natural disposition of the masculine and feminine complements, rather than trying to um, disrupt that and pretend that it's simply a construct and there aren't natural and normal flows of masculinity and femininity, then you wouldn't have this problem. The irredeemability comes from the disjointness of trying to make women be men and then compete with men in relationships to be the man that they want. That's what doesn't work. That's what's irredeemable. But they won't just acknowledge that. and then we turn to their place and be submissive to a man and fall into line of being the complement, the helpmate that God designed women to be to men. They want to continue to try to be men, yet then have men be more like women by being what they call emotionally intelligent, which is to be more emotionally emotive like women, but then chide men for being soft and not being masculine enough all at the same time. That's what's irredeemable, because the whole paradigm is completely disjointed and destructive in itself. I wanted to look at some other pieces, but my dialogue has run long here. I get to talking longer than I think I am, and I look down at the timer and it's going fast. But we're just going to mention a couple real quick. Women's latest dating trends couldn't be more sexist. My fellow female daters claim their straightness dooms them and blame all men for their unhappiness. Welcome to heterofatalism. So she has Poppy Sorby. Um, this is at the Times too. Okay. Well, it says the Times. I don't know what Times. It's thetimes.com. So you can check her out. This seems to be a more based piece on the matter. So that's how she posits the issue. And then we have so the name of the New York Times article was "The Trouble with Wanting Men," and this article from Eve Magazine, EVIE Magazine.com. This article takes off on that title, and it's called "The Trouble with Man Hating," or "The Trouble with Hating Men," as opposed to "The Trouble with Wanting Men." What the New York Times got wrong? Well, everything. Conversations about dating, relationships, marriage, and all of the messy parts in between have never been more visible or more relentless than they are today. That's absolutely right. So we can kind of see the disposition that this article is going to come from. You can check that one out too. Maybe I'll come back and talk about it more, probably depending on how this video does. Yabachi 2007 for Men's Mind State and Cultural Reviews. Please like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell, and I'll catch you on the next one. Peace. I'm out.